You probably think you are smart enough to spot a scam. But history proves that humans are actually giant gullible babies who will believe literally anything. We are talking about lies so massive they started wars, created fake nations, and even convinced doctors a woman gave birth to actual bunnies. So before we expose the 25 darkest and dumbest lies that changed the world forever, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe right now, or else I will convince your entire family that you are actually a secret alien spy. 1. Neville Chamberlain really thought he achieved world peace just by getting a signature from a guy with a funny mustache. In 1938, the British Prime Minister flew to Munich and basically asked Hitler to promise he would stop invading places if he got the Sudetenland. Hitler looked him right in the eye and swore he was totally done conquering Europe forever. Chamberlain flew home waving that piece of paper like he just won the lottery, while crowds cheered for peace. But barely a year later, Hitler rolled his tanks into Poland and started World War II, which killed 70 million people. It was the ultimate pinky promise betrayal that proved you should never trust a dictator who says he is just browsing. 2. The entire Gulf War started because a teenager gave the performance of a lifetime inside the United States Congress. In 1990, a 15-year-old girl named Naira cried her eyes out while telling politicians that Iraqi soldiers were stealing incubators and leaving babies to die on the cold floor. The horrifying story convinced everyone, including President Bush, to send troops into Kuwait immediately to stop the monsters. It turns out the whole thing was a massive lie cooked up by a fancy public relations firm to manipulate emotions. Naira was actually the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador and had been coached on exactly how to fake those tears. America went to war based on a fictional script that cost billions. 3. In 1964, Lyndon B. Johnson told everyone that North Vietnam attacked innocent American ships not once but twice in the Gulf of Tonkin. The breaking news made everyone furious and eager to fight back against those mean communists immediately. But the second attack was literally just nervous sailors shooting at dark waves and phantom radar blips because they were jumpy. There were 0 enemy torpedoes in the water that night, yet this ghost battle launched the massive Vietnam War. 58,000 Americans died chasing an enemy that wasn't even there that night just so politicians could look tough on TV. It was the original fake news story that ended with a tragic jungle disaster. 4. Everyone remembers when Vice President Cheney and President Bush scared the pants off the world about Saddam Hussein having nukes. They swore Iraq was hiding weapons of mass destruction that could create mushroom clouds over American cities any minute. We invaded in 2003 expecting to find secret labs and evil bioweapons everywhere, but found absolutely nothing except sand and old palaces. The intelligence was totally wrong, and maybe even manipulated just to finish a grudge match against a dictator. This trillion-dollar mistake destabilized the entire Middle East and eventually created ISIS, while Americans are still waiting for the receipt for this war. It was the most expensive wild goose chase in human history. 5. Some random Russian guys in 1903 wrote the worst fan fiction ever called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. They claimed it was a leaked secret manual where Jewish leaders planned to take over the whole world. It was obviously fake nonsense, but hateful people ate it up like candy, especially the Nazis who used it to justify the Holocaust. Even today, you have conspiracy nuts in their basements, recycling this garbage to explain why their lives are messy. It is terrifying that a poorly written forgery created purely to spread hate managed to fool millions of people into committing atrocities. This fake book proves that idiots will believe anything if it makes them feel special. 6. Scientists spent 40 years thinking they found the missing link in human evolution because of a goofy prank called Piltdown Man. In 1912, someone dug up a skull in England that looked half human and half ape, which thrilled every nerd in the world. They wrote textbooks and built careers around this bone until someone looked closer in the 50s. It turned out to be a medieval human skull glued to the jaw of a modern orangutan that was stained to look old. The entire scientific community had been duped by an arts and crafts project that a teenager could have made. It set real science back decades because the experts were too proud to admit they were wrong. 7. A cynical cigar smoker named George Hull wanted to troll religious people who believed giants once walked the earth. So he hired men to carve a 10-foot man out of gypsum block and buried it behind a barn in New York. When workers discovered it in 1869, everyone lost their minds and paid money to see the biblical proof. It was just a big rock, but people were so desperate to believe that even when P.T. Barnum made a fake copy of the fake giant, people paid to see that too. It proved that Americans will pay good money to stare at a lie as long as it confirms their wild theories about history. 8. The Catholic Church pulled off the biggest real estate scam in history with a forged letter called the Donation of Constantine. In the 8th century, they produced a document claiming the Emperor Constantine had gifted the Pope total control over the Western Roman Empire. For 700 years, nobody questioned it, and the Pope used this fake paper to fire kings and claim massive amounts of land. It wasn't until the Renaissance that a smart guy noticed the Latin words used in the text didn't even exist back in Constantine's time. The Church had been ruling Europe based on a counterfeit deed that wouldn't pass a basic spell check today. 9. You have to admire the audacity of tobacco executives who stood before Congress and swore smoking was totally safe. For decades, these companies knew their product was killing people and was more addictive than hard drugs, but they buried the research. They spent billions on cool ads showing rugged cowboys and doctors enjoying a smooth puff while customers coughed up their lungs. Internal documents eventually leaked, showing they were targeting kids to replace the dying customers they had already killed. It was a synchronized corporate lie that cost millions of lives just to keep the stock prices high. Now those cool cowboys are the face of grim karma in every anti-smoking commercial. 10. The American government promised free healthcare to hundreds of poor black men in Alabama, but actually signed them up for a death sentence. Starting in 1932, doctors told these men they were being treated for bad blood, when really they were being watched to see how syphilis kills the body. Even after penicillin was found to cure the disease in the 40s, the researchers hid it from the patients so the experiment could continue. Men went blind and died while spreading the disease to their families, all because the government wanted data points. It remains the darkest example of how authorities can treat human beings like lab rats under the guise of help. 11. Han von Meegeren was a petty artist who decided to prank the experts who called his work trash. He forged a lost painting by the master Vermeer, and it looked so legit that art snobs wept tears of joy. He ended up selling one to top Nazi Hermann Göring for a fortune, which is honestly a hilarious flex. When the war ended, the Dutch government tried to execute him for selling national treasures to the enemy. He had to scream that he faked it and actually paint a new one in the courtroom to prove he was a fraud. He went from being a traitor to a national hero, just for scamming a Nazi with a fake masterpiece. 12. Bernie Madoff was the Wizard of Wall Street who promised investors steady 10% returns no matter what the market did. For decades, celebrities and charities poured billions into his firm thinking he had a magic money machine. But it was just a classic pyramid scheme where he used new money to pay off the old guys. When the economy crashed in 2008, the music stopped and $65 billion vanished into thin air overnight. He ruined thousands of lives and wiped out life savings while living like a king in a penthouse. It proved that if something sounds too good to be true, it is probably just a guy named Bernie stealing your wallet. 13. Richard Nixon looked straight into the camera and famously told the American people, "I am not a crook," which is exactly what a crook would say. It started with a third-rate burglary at the Democratic headquarters in the Watergate Hotel that seemed totally random. Nixon swore up and down that the White House knew absolutely nothing about these clumsy burglars. But then secret tapes surfaced where the president was caught on audio planning the cover-up like a mob boss. The scandal was so dumb and messy that he became the first president to quit his job in shame. It changed politics forever, and now we add the word "gate" to every tiny scandal just to make it sound dramatic. 14. Joseph Stalin pulled off a horrifying magic trick where he made millions of people disappear and convinced the world they were just fine. In the 30s, he engineered a massive famine in Ukraine by stealing all their grain to sell abroad for cash. While people were literally starving to death in the streets, Soviet propaganda claimed everyone was happy and full. Western journalists were given tours of staged villages with fake food, while the real horror was hidden away. He called the starving farmers saboteurs and erased the famine from history books for decades. It was a genocide disguised as a bad harvest, and the world just let him get away with the lie. 15. The BBC pulled the greatest prank in television history on April Fool's Day in 1957. They aired a serious documentary showing Swiss farmers harvesting long strands of spaghetti from trees. The narrator spoke with such fancy British authority that nobody questioned why pasta was growing on branches. Thousands of viewers called the station begging for instructions on how to plant their own spaghetti bushes in the garden. It proved that people will believe anything if a guy with a posh accent says it on TV with confidence. This was the original fake news moment that showed how easily the media can turn intelligent adults into absolute noodle brains. 16. The French army was so desperate to find a spy that they just picked the nearest Jewish guy and framed him. In 1894, they accused Alfred Dreyfus of treason using handwriting evidence that looked nothing like his own writing. Even when they found the real spy, who was a totally different guy, the army refused to admit they messed up. They doubled down and forged more documents to keep an innocent man rotting on a Devil's Island prison. The scandal tore France apart and exposed how deep the hatred went in polite society. It was the original viral outrage moment that eventually helped birth the idea of a Jewish state because Europe was clearly unsafe. 17. Every American kid learns that George Washington chopped down a cherry tree and bravely told his dad, "I cannot tell a lie." It is the ultimate story of honesty that defines the Founding Father as a paragon of virtue. The funny part is that this story is a complete lie made up by a biographer named Parson Weems. He invented the whole thing years after Washington died just to sell more books to patriotic suckers. So the defining lesson about American truthfulness is actually a total fabrication created for profit. It is ironic that we teach children not to lie by telling them a lie about a guy who never lied. 18. When the Chernobyl nuclear reactor exploded in 1986, the Soviet Union tried to play it off like a minor fender bender. They waited days to tell anyone while a radioactive cloud drifted over the entire continent of Europe. The government told their own citizens everything was under control while sending men to their deaths to shovel toxic graphite. They prioritized looking strong over saving lives and let children play outside in radioactive dust. It wasn't until Sweden detected the radiation that the Soviets finally admitted they had a meltdown. This glow-in-the-dark denial proved that a lying government is actually more dangerous than a nuclear explosion. 19. The British Daily Mail published a bombshell letter in 1924 that claimed the Soviet Union was plotting a revolution in Britain. The letter urged communists to rise up, and it terrified the voters right before a major election. The Labour Party got crushed because everyone was scared of Reds hiding under their beds. Years later, it was revealed that the letter was a forgery likely planted by spies to swing the vote. It was the original election interference hack that proved fear is the best way to win votes. A fake piece of paper changed the government and showed that dirty tricks are the oldest tradition in politics. 20. Hitler wanted to invade Poland, but needed to look like the victim, so he staged the worst false flag operation ever. In 1939, Nazis dressed up in Polish uniforms and attacked their own radio station in Germany. They even left behind dead bodies, which were actually concentration camp prisoners they had murdered just for props. Hitler went on the radio screaming that Poland had fired the first shot and he had no choice but to defend himself. This transparent lie was the excuse for launching tanks and starting the deadliest war in human history. It remains the textbook example of how tyrants manufacture crises to get exactly what they want. 21. In 1726, a woman named Mary Toft convinced the smartest doctors in England that she was giving birth to rabbits. This is not a joke, she actually delivered 17 dead bunnies, while medical experts watched in amazement. The king's own surgeon believed her and wrote reports claiming it was a medical miracle that defied nature. But eventually someone caught her buying rabbits, and she confessed to stuffing animal parts inside herself before the doctors arrived. It remains the grossest and dumbest medical hoax in history that proves experts are easily fooled. The entire medical community was humiliated because they really thought a human woman was the mother of a petting zoo. 22. Long before computers existed, a machine called the Turk shocked the world by playing unbeatable chess against humans. Built in 1770, this mechanical man defeated legends like Napoleon and Benjamin Franklin while wearing a turban. Everyone thought it was a mechanical genius or some kind of dark magic powering the wooden arms. But the secret was literally just a small human chess master cramped inside the cabinet, moving the pieces with magnets. It toured for decades, fooling everyone into thinking artificial intelligence had arrived early. It was the original fake tech demo that showed people will believe in magic robots rather than suspecting a sweaty guy hiding in a box. 23. Orson Welles decided to interrupt a radio music program in 1938 with breaking news that Martians were invading New Jersey. The broadcast sounded so real, with terrified reporters screaming about heat rays and alien tripods destroying cities. Legend says that thousands of Americans panicked and loaded their shotguns to fight off the green men from space. While the mass hysteria was probably exaggerated by newspapers, it still proved the power of fake news. People were so on edge that a radio play about aliens turned normal citizens into a terrified mob. It was the ultimate media troll that showed how quickly society cracks when the news gets scary enough. 24. Gregor McGregor was a con artist who invented an entire country called Poyais, located in Central America. He drew fake maps and printed fake currency for this tropical paradise where gold was lying on the riverbanks. He was so convincing that hundreds of Scottish people sold everything they owned to buy land in his imaginary kingdom. When the settlers finally arrived after a long voyage, they found nothing but a malaria-infested jungle swamp. Most of them died of disease and starvation, waiting for a king who never existed. It was the deadliest real estate scam ever, where people bought a one-way ticket to hell because the brochure looked nice. 25. In 1983, a German magazine announced the scoop of the century, claiming they found the lost secret diaries of Adolf Hitler. They paid $9 million for 60 volumes of journals that would rewrite the history of the war. Serious historians analyzed the writing, and declared it was definitely the work of the dictator himself. But then a forensic expert noticed that the paper contained a chemical that wasn't invented until the 50s. The ink was basically fresh, and the content was just boring ramblings written by a forger in his back room. It was a multi-million-dollar embarrassment that proved people are still obsessed with buying Nazi souvenirs. So there you have it, proof that humans are gullible enough to buy fake countries and believe in bunny birthing moms. If you don't want to be the next sucker in history books, you better smash that like button and subscribe to Liebuster right now before I try to sell you the Brooklyn Bridge. Let me know in the comments, what is the single dumbest lie you actually believed as a kid? I really need a good laugh. And don't scroll away. Click this video right here to see even crazier scams that will absolutely melt your brain. Trust me, I'm not lying this time.